Hi, in this first video I want to talk about the core challenge facing anyone who's considering giving feedback on the Grassy Mountain terms of reference, and that challenge is a political double bind, a snare that's built right into the invitation to participate. Here's the snare. If you participate, you risk losing, because polite technical feedback can easily be spun as consent to a process that already violates good faith democratic procedure. But if you don't participate, you also lose, because your silence will be read in the government's preferred narrative as public apathy. So we're handed a choice between two forms of losing. But there is a third option, and it's the only one that protects your voice. It is to participate in a way that cannot be spun as consent. This is what I'm calling unspinnable participation. The first level is simple and punchy. You start your submission with a single clear sentence. I am submitting feedback on this EIA. My participation does not imply support for the project, for the removal of the coal moratorium, or for the regulatory framework under which this process is taking place. Short, clear, impossible to misread. The second level is more explicit and fully unspinnable. Here's how a fuller opening works. I am submitting feedback on this EIA. I do so not as an endorsement of the project, the removal of the coal moratorium, or the regulatory framework under which it proceeds. I am participating to document the structural, procedural, and democratic issues that make meaningful public input difficult. This submission should not be interpreted as consent or as social license for coal development. This names the trap, refuses co-optation, and frames your submission as corrective. Once you begin with an unspinnable statement, everything that follows is framed as a response to political injury, not as support for the process. It frees you to comment honestly on the deeper democratic harms built into the terms of reference. For example, you can point to the democratic rupture created when the 1976 coal policy moratorium was rescinded without a mandate. Albertans did not support new coal development in the eastern slopes, yet the current terms of reference proceed as if that public backlash and the partial reinstatement never happened. Under these conditions, any impact assessment is already compromised. Before technical matters can be considered credible, the terms of reference must acknowledge the democratic deficit at the foundation of this project's revival. You can also point to the Alberta Energy Regulators, that's the AER's, structural conflict of interest. Its legislated mandate to enable resource development sits alongside its responsibility to assess environmental risk. That dual role makes impartial evaluation impossible. The terms of reference must reflect this. And you can call out the double bind directly. This consultation offers no assurance that public feedback won't be used as evidence of social license. Naming this is part of making your participation unspinnable. The terms of reference heavily emphasize technical and biophysical categories. But many of the most important impacts of coal development are social, cultural, and moral. From public trust to watershed ethics to cumulative effects on shared landscapes and livelihoods. These are not extras, they are central to the public interest. If the terms of reference are to regain public legitimacy, they must include an acknowledgement of the democratic concerns around the removal of the coal moratorium, a recognition of the AER's structural conflict of interest, engagement with the 2021 Joint Review Panel findings, elevation of social, cultural, and moral risks to primary assessment categories, and safeguards to prevent participation from being interpreted as social license. And you can end the same way you began, with an unspinnable closing statement. I submit these concerns to place them on the public record. This submission should not be construed as support for the project, nor for the policy and regulatory changes that have enabled it. It is offered in the hope that the AER will acknowledge the democratic, structural, and procedural issues raised here and revise the terms of reference accordingly. That's the structure of unspinnable participation. You participate, but you do so in a way that refuses to be used, and that opens the door for honest democratic critique.